An integer variable contains a whole number. That is, a number with no decimal places. Strings and integers make up the majority of variables in most ASP.NET applications. To begin this lesson, open the Shining Stone sample file from your Sample Files folder. And open the code behind file of by.aspx if it isn't open already. Now you're going to create an integer variable. Click in the Page Load event handler and add the following code. Int testInt equals 10 response.write testInt. This code creates a new int variable called testInt with a value of 10 and displays it on the page. Along with int, there are two other integer variable types, short and long. Much like lowercase string and string with a capital S, the int variable has another name in the .NET framework. Int32 means exactly the same thing as int. An int32 is a 32-bit integer. This means that an int32, or int variable, takes up 32 bits of memory and can hold numbers up to 2,147,483,647. Short and long variables correspond to the real variable names of int16 and int64. An int16 variable can hold numbers up to 32,767, while an int64 can hold incredibly high numbers. If you found that your int variables were using too much memory, you would probably convert them to short variables if you knew that their values would never exceed 32,767. Long variables are useful on the rare occasions when you need to work with numbers greater than 2 billion. General practice is to use int for all integer variables, and only change them to short and long if it becomes necessary. Much like with strings, you can also create empty integer variables by using code such as int testInt. However, unlike strings, this would actually give testInt the value of 0 instead of null. The same is true of the short and long types. Normal integer variables can't be set to null, but you can create nullable versions of them if you need to. You'll learn more about null and nullable variables in Lesson 5.12. To continue, view by.aspx in your web browser. You can see that the number 10 from your int variable is displayed at the top of the page. Close your web browser now. Because C# understands that the int variable is a number rather than a piece of text, you can perform mathematical operations with it, such as adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Add a new line after int testInt equals 10, and add the following code. testInt equals testInt plus 5. This code will add 5 to the value of the testInt variable. View the page in your browser again, and this time 15 is displayed on the page. That's the sum of 10 plus 5. Close your web browser now, and this time you're going to retrieve an int value from a property of a control. Some properties of controls are integers, such as the selected index property of a drop-down list control. Add a new line after testInt equals testInt plus 5, and add the following code. testInt equals drop-down list country dot selected index. Now view the page in your browser and complete the form, making sure to choose a country from the drop-down menu. The index value for the country that you selected is displayed. Now change the country in the drop-down list and submit the form again, and the index number that is displayed changes to the index number of the country that you selected. In a real-world application, you'd usually use the selected value property instead of the selected index property to identify a user's drop-down choice. To keep things simple, you didn't use the selected value property because it is a string rather than an integer. Close your web browser now and remove all code from the page load event handler. Now close Visual Studio, saving your changes if prompted. You've now completed Lesson 5.4. Use integer variables.